so stressed, which is the point of this series. So we're in part 2 of Burnout Society, and what we're talking about, and maybe this isn't you, and if it's not, you should teach a seminar at the end of the series, and I mean that, but for so many of us, we feel stressed, we feel exhausted, we feel overwhelmed, your schedule is too much, and we're not sure what to do about it or what the next move is, but as we started to introduce last week, for so many people, and it's really every age group, we just feel like normal is not working. And if you look at all of the data in terms of our pace, which means our schedule, our priorities, how we're just kind of living and running our life, like it is not working. It is leading to emotional, relational, financial, spiritual unhealth. It's just a pace that is not sustainable. And a lot of times we said last week, and you can go back and listen to it, it's driven from fear, and we never think about that. When you're thinking about your schedule and priorities, you're not thinking about what am I afraid of. But for so many cases, it's fear of not mattering, fear of missing out, fear of falling behind, and we literally make decisions and are driven into behaviors based off of that. And so it's just not working. You look at the statistics, and there's so many people who are quickly headed toward burnout, have burnout, or trying to recover from burnout. And burnout is just when you go over the line and you're maxed out in terms of your emotional and physical health, and it affects every area of your life. And so we all kind of know that. Like at some point there's a breaking point. At some point there's a limit for a married couple who has no reserves whatsoever, and then they hit some kind of bump and everything implodes. Or it's the individual who can't enjoy anything because they're always worrying about the next thing and just trying to survive and make it to the next weekend or the vacation or whatever that, carrot is that they're chasing. And it just affects everything. And the thing about it is we all think, and I get why we think this, because you look around at people in whatever season you're in. I mean, empty nesters feel this. You're raising kids, you feel this. You're in college, you're single. Millennials, it's a big deal with them, but it's really every age group. You just feel like you can't do anything about it. I mean, this is everybody. It's normal. It's the pace that we run at, and I'm not sure how to do anything different. And a lot of times we're also seduced into this idea of like, well, it's just a season. It's just a season. It's just a season. But here's the thing. If your busy season has no end, it's no longer a season. It's your life. So, right, some of you have been telling yourself it's a season for 12 years. It's not a season anymore. You've gone in and out of several seasons, and now this is just your life rhythm. This is kind of where you're at. So here's the thing we said last week. Even if you don't think this is attainable or this is realistic, I get it. It still is true. And that is that life is better when there is margin. Life is better when there is space. Every area of your life. This is including financially, it's relationally, it's in terms of your schedule, your priorities. Life is just better when you have some kind of margin. For some of us, because there's no margin, anytime we hit a bump, it could be a relational thing, an emotional thing, something hits the fan out of nowhere. It's not so much that you don't have resilience to make it through that. You just have not created any margin to handle anything more than you are already handling, because there's just no space there. And so margin is just this. It's the space between our current pace, the pace in which we're living our life, and our limits. And there is a pace that we're running, all of us. It's either a healthy pace, it's an unhealthy pace. It is a pace that's directing toward unhealthy and toward burnout. And whatever the pace is, it ultimately has a limit on it. And so what we said last week is a healthy pace, healthy margin looks like I'm not always frantic between every single event and appointment. Now I get there, again, there are seasons. When we were raising toddlers, it felt like for a few years, everything was frantic and it was never gonna end, and it lasted 30 years, even though it didn't, it felt like it did. But you're not frantic between every appointment. You actually have some margin for the relationships that you value in your life. You actually have even, this is crazy, a little bit of margin and space to enjoy some of your life. That you're able to prioritize and have space for some of the things that you say is a priority for you or for your family. That we talked about last week spiritually. Some of you are Jesus followers or God followers, and you want that to be a priority. And yet, if you were to look at your family and what you're prioritizing for your students and getting them in environments that actually are catalysts for that kind of growth, or for your family, and where that lays on your schedule, you would recognize I don't actually have or prioritize the thing that I say is most important to us. It's a rhythm where you have some emotional reserves when you hit some kind of wall. It's a rhythm where you work as hard as you can at work, but you still have some kind of reserves for your family. But here's what we said last week. For a lot of us, though, in an attempt to get the most out of life, you can actually lose control of your life. You can kind of lose control of where you want to be and what's actually healthy. And eventually this always takes a toll on us in the future. There's always a relational toll, a financial toll, a mental health toll. But and this is the difficult thing, we never see it in the moment because you can neglect certain things and it's small deposits of time over time. You get to the end of the month, you don't notice it. You get to the end of the year, you may not notice it. You get 5 years down the road, and all of a sudden, there's some relational stuff that starts to surface. There's some physical health that you haven't paid attention to. Mark Batterson says it this way, we sow and reap, but it's always at the speed of a seed, which means we just don't see either positively or negatively what we're investing in until way down the road or later on in life. So last week, we started with this question. What is the price of your what? What's the price of your current pace? Because there is always opportunity cost. And there may be a lot of things that's directing your schedule. They're not bad. They're not wrong. But you just have to understand that whatever you decide to do, whatever you decide to fill it with, whatever pace that you are running, there's a price ultimately to that current pace down the road. And it's not surprising. All throughout Scripture, you see God leading people to live lives with margin. Basically him going, I've created you with a rhythm. I want you to accomplish. I want you to be productive. I want you to completely steward the God-given resources and talent that I've given you, but you need to recognize in every area of your life, God would say, there are limits, and I want you to live within those limits. So what I want to do for a few minutes is just talk about our time. Because your time, and you know this already, your time is your most valuable asset. Your time is your life. And one of the things in our kind of achievement society, which is how many will describe it. And by the way, if you look back with the rise of the achievement society, specifically in our country, there's a direct link to the rise of the epidemic of depression. But this achievement society, what we tend to do is add, but we never subtract. We just keep adding stuff. I quoted this last week. I love the studies from the 1960s that predicted a 2-day work week because of the rise in technological advances. But that didn't happen. What we did was we just blew past all of the limits. Limits with work, limits with family, limits with experiences, limits with acquisitions. And now, in a lot of cases, we have traded our peace for just more. And the issue, again, is not don't be productive. But the issue is God has designed you to live within limits, and do not trade your peace for just more. And so the question you got to ask, though, is how do we do this? Like, what's the first step? Because here's what I've tried to acknowledge so far in this series. This feels so overwhelming. We are living at such a pace and culture, and it's so normalized, and everybody you probably do life with is doing the same thing, that it is so hard to unwind from it. Like, where do I even start? All of the ramifications of that. If I quit this, what's it going to mean? So, like, where do you start? How do you begin to make traction in this? Because, I said this last week, too, if it were easy, you would have already done it. Like, if it was easy for us, we would have already handled this. We wouldn't have gone through multiple seasons feeling anxiety-ridden, overwhelmed, everybody in our family feeling that way, schedules too full, we're running at a frantic pace, we don't know what to do about it. If it were easy to solve, we would have already done it. So of all people, Moses comes along in the Old Testament and gives absolutely, and I'm not overstating this, brilliant advice around how do we create margin, what's the first step, and how we fill our time. And really what Moses does is he gives us a perspective that if we would ever adopt this perspective, it has the power to override the fear that's driving our decisions and give us the courage to begin to change as it relates to how we live our life, our schedules, and our pace. I'm telling you, when I came across this verse years ago, it became a catalytic, defining verse for me that I think about all the time. It's a verse that I memorize. That the perspective behind it, I mean, it's so easy to just read and gloss right over it and keep going, but it is so powerful that it has the potential to give you clarity and courage to do what you need to do in regard to your schedule. So real quick backstory on Moses. Moses lived to be 120 years old, and this is a random fact in the Bible, but I love random facts in the Bible. It says he was 120 years old and still had great eyesight. Why we need to know that, I have no idea. But that's fantastic. And already I'm not near 120 years old and I don't have great eyesight, so it's pretty exceptional. So he's 120 years old. For whatever reason, he had great eyesight and everybody wanted us to know that. And if you know about Moses, he lived like 4 different lives. Moses grew up or didn't grow up, but he was born as a Hebrew. And then he was taken to and adopted into the Egyptian household in literally the palace. So he lived with the best of the best. I mean, amazing accommodations, the best food, the best entertainment. I mean, Moses had it all. But he never really lost sight of where he came from, and he had this heart for justice. And so there was this event that goes down, and Moses realizes he's got to flee from the Egyptian palace, and he goes off and basically is a nomadic Hebrew shepherd for the next 40 years. And again, we don't know how the story ends. For him, to put it in our language, he just thinks he's sitting in a cubicle for 40 years. He's not accomplishing anything. It's just another day. It all looks the same, and he has no idea what God is up to. Eventually, you may know the story, God taps him to go back to the Egyptian people and then to deliver his Hebrew or Israelite, what became a nation, from Egyptian captivity where they had been slaves for 400 years. And Moses leads them out and into the desert, and they're circling around waiting for God knows where, and literally only God knew where. And they were just wondering, what's next? And he's with a bunch of grumbling, complaining people in the middle of the desert. Christians were different back then, and did just for 40 years of that. And then he gets to the edge of what would be known as the promised land. He's like, and now we're here, and God's like, but you're not going in. And so Moses lives like 4 different lives. He has incredible perspective on life. He's 120 years old, and he's got good eyesight. And he sits down, and he writes a psalm where he kind of paints this huge picture of God, and then he gets to this perspective or insight that I'm telling you has the potential to change some things in your life. We always think of the Psalms in terms of David, but this is a psalm, Psalm 90, actually written by Moses. And here's what he said. He starts again at like 5,000 feet, and then he moves in to his main point. And his main point was this: your time is a gift from God, and it's limited. And when you can be, and we know this intuitively, but when you can actually begin to live like this and put this front and center, it'll change things. Here's what Moses said: Lord, you have been our dwelling place through all generations, meaning in every generation, there you are. In every generation, you're in control. In every generation, you show up, and you're the God of the universe, meaning we're a part of a bigger story. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the earth and the world, from everlasting to what? Everlasting, you're God. Every generation, from everlasting to everlasting, basically, we are in the context of a bigger story that's not about us, that was written by God. That God raises up nations and leaders and kings and kingdoms, and then he sets them aside to the margins of society or history, and he controls and he orchestrates and he leads. He's in control of it all, generation to generation, everlasting to everlasting. And then verse 3, you turn men back to dust, saying, return to dust, O sons of men. Basically, we're part of a bigger story, and God controls the length of your days. God controls the length of my days. God controls the length of my life. I'm a part of a bigger story that God's writing, and God is in control of every part of the number of my days. Now, a lot of us believe this. But even if you're not sure about this, it's kind of amazing that if you were to go out tomorrow and you were to get hit with some kind of diagnosis that you were not expecting, some kind of health crisis, some kind of tragedy hits, it's amazing that people, and this isn't a shot, I get it, it's just in us. Even if you're kind of deconstructing and not sure about God, it's amazing when something hits, you start to pray to a God you're not sure if you believe in. And when we do that, or when you do that as a Jesus follower, as a God follower, because suddenly you get a diagnosis you weren't expecting, and you feel everything kind of closing in on you, in that moment, there's just this thing intuitively inside of you where you believe, which is why you pray, that God controls the length of your days. That God controls the length of your life. And then verse 4, for 1,000 years in your sight are like a what? Yeah, let's do that one more time. Just making sure you're still with me. 1,000 years in your sight are like what? A day, like 1,000 years a day that has gone by, or like a watch in the night, which is like 3 hours. I mean, the older you get, you're like, time flies by. I feel like it's all older people talk about. It's like how quick time goes, but more and more I find myself in that category. So I'm talking about the weather and how fast time is moving. Can't wait for the cold front tomorrow. I'm so excited. So I'm just owning it. But can you imagine the perspective of God? He's like, where did the last 3,000 years go? It was just 950 BC, and here we are, because a day is like 1,000 years. And his point is just this: do you know how finite your life is? Do you know how quick your time is? Do you know that you're under the umbrella of a God of the universe from everlasting to everlasting, from generation to generation? And can you imagine the perspective in the context of your life? In the eyes of a God, that a day is like 1,000 years, and all the stuff that you are so bent out about, and it's so urgent, and we got to get this done, and what's going to happen? He's like, it's cute. Because I'm the God from everlasting to everlasting, a generation to generation. A day is like 1,000 years. And then he says, you sweet men in a sleep of death, they're like the new grass of the morning, or like a baby that's born. And then verse 6, though in the morning it springs up, by evening it's dry and withered. Welcome to church. Like, he's basically like, your life is short. You know this already, but we don't want to live like this. Your life is quick. It's over like this. Especially in the perspective of a God of the universe from generation to generation. And this is different in other cultures, but specifically with American culture. We know it's not true, but we want to live as if our days are limitless. We don't want to talk about death. We don't like going to funerals. And we're so obsessed more and more with our health, which is an incredible thing, but nobody's escaping this. And we love to, and there's a consequence to this. We love to live as if our days are limitless. That somehow you're going to Pilates your way around this, that you're going to, you're going to essential oil your way past it. And Moses is like, no, it's coming for you. And Moses is like, here's my only point. I don't want you, because there's a consequences. I want you to connect with this reality, because there actually is a consequence in terms of how you live your life and the decisions you make if you live as if your time is limitless. I want you to understand reality. And here's his point. His point is not that your life doesn't matter. Your life matters immensely. That God has a plan and a will and a destiny for your life. His point is not that he doesn't care. He cares more than you can even imagine. It's that you're not going to be around long in terms of this life and you walking on planet Earth the way that you're doing right now in this moment. You're not going to be around long. You are a part of a bigger story, and you need to begin to live like you will not live forever. And you're not the center of the story that God is writing throughout the generations. And when you can begin to just understand that, you can back up from some of the stuff that seems so urgent, and what is going to happen, and what if we don't, and what are they going to think, and the schedules and the priorities and the things that you're driven for because you're afraid that you might not matter to them. You're afraid that you might fall behind some undefined standard. You're afraid you might not measure up. And the God of the universe is going, all the stuff that you think is so big a deal, so urgent, you're so worried about what they think. You're in the context of the God of the universe from everlasting to everlasting who's writing a bigger story, and you're not the center of that story, but he has a plan for your life. And so I want you to begin to live as if your days are not limitless. Verse 10, the length of your days is like 70 years or 80 if we have the strength. And yet their span is but trouble and sorrow. And basically what Moses is saying is, this isn't not, your whole life just sucks. His point is this. If your perspective is, this is all there is. If your perspective is, I've got to be driven by everybody else and the fear that's motivating me, and that I've got to squeeze the little bit I can out of it, be a great steward, be productive with what God has given you. But Moses is trying to draw you back to just make the point, this is not all there is. And if you think this is all there is, you are going to fill up your days with a lot of stuff that doesn't matter in an attempt to matter. And you're going to get in that mode that so many people get into where you're just trying to survive, and your life will just feel like trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away. And then it's kind of a confusing verse, but he's kind of hyperbolic to paint the picture of God's power and that God's overall. He says, who knows? Or who can see clearly the power of your anger? For your wrath is as great as the fear that is due you. Without giving you a complex Hebrew grammar lesson, his point is just this. It's this hyperbolic way of going, you're under the umbrella of the God of all creation, from everlasting to everlasting, from generation to generation. That he's over all, he's above all, and when you see him clearly, you will give him the glory that he deserves. Or when you see him clearly and understand who he is and the story that you're caught up in, you will be more intentional with the time that you've been given. Now here's the problem with this. We don't see clearly, though. In fact, the scripture actually says that we kind of see in part. One day we will see fully. One day we will see with clarity. And so what Moses says next, this is the perspective that if we could embrace it, potentially could change everything. Because what he says is, this is not natural. This is not intuitive. You know what's natural? Natural is, I'm just going to live my days are limitless. I'm going to live like I'm not going to die. I'm going to live as if this is going to go on forever. And Moses is like, that's natural. That's what human beings tend to do. So because you don't see clearly, you actually have to be taught something, and you have to begin to, in essence, put into practice something so that you can begin to live in a different way. So he says this, teach us to what? Teach us. Not intuitive, will not arrive on this. If you just go with the current of the culture, you will do what everybody else does. You will live the way everybody else lives. This has to be an intentional effort to practice and to be taught how to think and how to live different in such a way that you do what few people do. You live in a way that few people are willing and able to live their life. You live in such a way that you number your days. Moses is going, God, teach us. Help us to learn to number our days, or in essence, help us to live like our days are actually numbered. And isn't it true, and I've heard from so many already in just the short time that we've started this series, we just get into this fantasy land where we don't live that way, as if we're going to have our spouse forever, that we're going to have this season with our kids forever, that we're going to have this opportunity or this stewardship or this moment or this thing forever. And Moses is going, you're not going to have it forever. And you can't get it over again. And you're not going to get it completely right. And you're not going to get it perfect. But you need to recognize that your time is a stewardship. And you're accountable. And so Moses says, help us to remember that our days are numbered. Because here's the reality question. What do you do? What do you do with something that you think you have an endless supply of? Even if you know it's not true, some of you who don't know how to do a budget, you live like this all the time, and it creates a lot of issues. What do you do with something that you think you have an endless supply of? You waste it every single time. When you live as if, even if it's not true, you live as if something is limitless, you ultimately waste it. And so Moses is like, teach us to remember that our days are numbered. This is what we do all the time. If you're waiting for some kind of project, some kind of event, you're about to graduate, you're going to get married, this is exactly what we do. We literally number our days. We count down our days until we get there. Moses is like, help us to do what we do just in terms of just stuff in life. Help us to number and prepare. Help us to number and prepare. Help us not to live like we have an endless supply of time. This is why every baby dedication, Bradley will do this little demonstration with these marbles in a jar that recount the number of weeks between when your child is born and 18. And we've kind of implemented that in our household as just a reminder. Like, I love the seasons my kids are going into. I love what's in front of them, but I also just want to recognize the season I have right now. The season goes really fast. I'm not going to have this season forever. And so literally, there's kind of a countdown of the weeks to go. I want to maximize the time that we have been given with this stewardship. And Moses is like, God, teach us to recognize that our time is limited, because when you recognize that you have a limited resource, isn't this true? You're incredibly careful with it. When you recognize that you have a limited resource, you are incredibly careful with it. So he says, teach us, because we have to learn this, to number our days. And then here's the result. That we may, what's the word? Literally in agricultural terms, sow and reap. But you always reap at the speed of a seed. Meaning the thing that you ignored, the time that you ignored, the relationship investment that you ignored, where things were out of balance, or you over-programmed everything because you are so afraid they're going to miss out. You don't see it in a week. You don't see it in 6 months. You don't even see it in a year. But eventually you reap something, or on the other side of that, when you decide to live within the limits and like, I want to kill it at work, but I also want to kill it at home, and I want to make sure I'm creating margin in other areas of my life, and I'm going to live within the limits that God has given me. You're sowing and you're reaping. And so Moses says, God, teach us to number our days, or recognize that our days are numbered, so that we may gain, or we may reap, a heart of what? Wisdom. Wisdom to know what to do, what not to do, what to prioritize, what not to prioritize, what to chase, and what to stop chasing. Moses like to teach us to be so clued in that our days are numbered, that we see every single day and every single season as unbelievably valuable, and that we are so clear on the fact that our time is finite that it overrides the fear. It overrides the embarrassment. It overrides the, but what if I don't matter? What if we fall behind? What if we don't measure up? That it would override, and I would have such clarity that we know what we need to do, what we don't need to do in regard to the life that God has called us to live. Or let me put it another way. when you get to the end of your life, and because of what I do, I've had so many of these experiences with people in their final moments. Here's what I will tell you over and over again. In those moments where people know, like, my time is limited and they know it, they have extraordinary clarity over what mattered most, over what they should have done, shouldn't have done, what they should have prioritized. And here's what Moses is saying. This is so brilliant from Moses. Moses is going, I want you to reach into the future, to those final moments of your life when you really will have clarity about what matters most, or those moments where you're just confronted with the temporariness of life and it just kind of does something to you. I want you to reach into those moments. I want you to grab the wisdom that you are going to get in that space, and then I want you to bring it into your present life, and I want you to live that way right now. Moses is going, I don't want you to wait, because one day you'll have extraordinary clarity. And Moses says, that kind of clarity, that kind of unique wisdom is available to you right now. Teach me. I want to learn this. To number my days so that I may gain or reap a harvest of wisdom. To know what to do and what not to do, so I don't have to get to the end and go, I know what I should have done, but I didn't do it. I didn't program it. I didn't act. I didn't make it a priority. Remembering our time is limited provides us with wisdom to know how to spend our limited time. Your time is limited. So limit what you do with your time. So, to drive this home, here's what I want to do. I want to take all of you to the end of your life real quick. And I want to do it through the writings of Bonnie Ware. Bonnie Ware wrote an article that blew up, eventually became a book. And she was an Australian hospice nurse, and she would, with her specific role, she would generally be with people toward the last 12 weeks of their life. And that's what she did for years, about a decade and a half or longer. And during that time, she would get insight into just kind of what they felt and what they were thinking. And she would always ask them the questions, hey, what would you do different? What would you prioritize different? What would you go back and change? And so over a decade and a half of doing this, there was basically the two top regrets that they would have. And this is the insight from people who knew, they knew that their days literally were limited. And they got the wisdom that accompanies that. And here's what they said. There's top two regrets. I'm going to start with the second one and then the first one. The second one is maybe what you would think the first one would be. But here was their number one regret, the hundreds of people that she cared for. Or the number two regret. I wish that I hadn't worked so hard. This came from every male patient that I nursed. They missed their children's youth and their partner's companionship. Women also spoke of this regret, but as most were from an older generation, many of the female patients had not been breadwinners. All of the men I nursed deeply regretted spending so much of their lives on the treadmill of a work existence. That's the clarity that you get at the end of your life. And to go back to this again, especially depending on how you've been wired, if you're like me, achiever, type A, whatever, this could be more difficult. And God's saying, listen, I've given you a role, I've given you a purpose, I've given you this desire to be productive. I want you to kill it at work, but not at the expense of killing relationships. I want you to kill it at work and kill it at home. I want you to create margin, and I want you to create a holistic approach in every area of your life to live within the limits that I've created you for, because there are limits. But if you do not live like your days are numbered, you will end up misspending your days, and you will have avoidable regret. And here's the thing, there is enough unavoidable regret in life that we can't avoid. It's just coming for us. Moses is going, I don't want you to stack up unavoidable regret that you could have circumvented. And these are the people that they're at the end of their life, and they have the wisdom that comes with numbering their days, but they have it because they're forced into it. And Moses is like, I don't want you to wait. I want you to live that way right now. And then here was the number one regret. That was the second one. Here was the number one regret. I wish that I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the lives that others, culture, trying to keep up. Do I matter? Am I going to fall behind? Am I going to miss out? Nobody else is doing this. I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me. This was the most common regret of all. When people realize that their life is almost over and they look back clearly on it, it is easy to see how many dreams have gone unfulfilled. Most people had not honored even half of their dreams and had to die knowing that it was due to the choices that they had made or not made. And then I love this sentence. Health. Next slide. Brings a freedom that very few realize until they no longer have it. And here's the thing, and can I just talk to men for a second, because I am one. And maybe this is everybody, but specifically men. We can get so hyper-focused on delayed gratification, which is a good thing. It's a spiritual thing. But we're so hyper-focused on delayed gratification, down the road, eventually, that we have some kind of utopian version of the future of eventually, that you never actually live fully present in this moment. To quote Arthur Brooks again from last week, you never live small. You know what living small is? Living small is stopping to notice stuff and having enough margin in life where you can do that every once in a while, to take something in, to enjoy good wine and a sunset and or whatever your thing is, to look into your kids' eyes and actually be fully present to a conversation without a phone in your hand. It's to be able to enjoy the things that God's given you in your life rather than just next thing, and allow that to well up because you're a Jesus follower, to recognize all of this is the hand of God, and these seemingly mundane moments are not mundane moments. They're actually acts of worship, that God is so good and God is behind all of this, and yet we live lives with no margin to enjoy any of that, no margin for gratitude, no margin for worship. It's one of the things that years ago I was so convicted by this with my kids, because I've seen so many men, especially with my personality. I'll share a story next week about kind of the first year of our marriage where I had a come to Jesus moment of I had to change some things, or I knew it long term it would go bad. But I had so many who were driven and get it done in the next thing, and I saw what that did. That I wanted to make a concerted effort of just at least in part, and I'm not great at this, but teaching my kids to enjoy life. One of the words we use in our home all the time is whimsical. Just enjoy life, notice things around you. Because I watch so many men, I'm sure it's not just men, but just get to the place, they never enjoyed anything. They never slowed down. They lost all wonder. It's just the next thing. And so I would just start to teach my kid, hey, if you want to build a farm in suburbia, build a farm in suburbia and haul in goats. True story. So we did that. Or, well, what other crazy stuff we did? Learn to slow down and be fully present, fully in the moment. And I get all the objections. Well, if I don't do all I possibly can, and again, I'm not telling you to not achieve and not be productive, but you have been given limits. And part of walking by faith is living within the limits that God has given you. You know, one of the greatest threats to our spiritual walk, relationship with our kids, healthy relationships around us in our day is busyness. So I get the objections. Well, if I don't do all I possibly can to a point of overextending myself, I'll never make it. Let me just, if you were to survey those people that were part of that survey, if you can go to that slide, if I don't do as much as I possibly can, I will never make it. You better make sure that you know what it is. You better know what you're actually chasing, because a lot of times it was something handed to you by a parent, or it's social media, or it's contact, or if I don't do all I possibly can, I'll fall behind. And again, my question is who? Who are you falling behind? Who are you so worried about? It is so possible to not recognize your time is limited. So do not limit your life by constantly wanting somebody else's life who has probably overextended themselves. Or if I don't do all I possibly can, I won't have enough. A lot of you live under this. What's enough? Have you ever defined it? Do you know what it is? What is enough for you? Because sometimes we are driving decisions and behaviors and certain things that we do by an undefined emotion. We don't even know what it is. We don't even know what the benchmark is. We just are afraid of not enough. If I don't do all I possibly can, I won't be accepted. By who? Who are you afraid of being accepted by? In a lot of cases, you know this already, but by people that will not even be in your life in 5 years. A job you won't even have. Who? This is so close to Nicole and I, because there's somebody that we watched for years get to the place where they were in this all-consuming career, and they sacrificed relationships and family on that altar. And then there was another relationship that they wouldn't let go of, and we literally watched over a course of years them sacrificing their family and their relationships. And you know what's really interesting now? This is about a decade later. They got fired from that career, and that person is no longer in their life. And yet they traded their family and their relationships for something that's not even a part of their life anymore. Who are you worried about? Or last one, if I don't do all I possibly can, I won't measure up. Measure up to what? Make sure that you don't chase what you never defined. And so Moses says, God, teach us to number our days and then embrace the wisdom that comes from that. Because when you begin to learn how to live that way, it will give you the courage and the clarity to overcome a lot of the cultural majority thinking, to make difficult decisions and lean into the rhythm that God has given you for your life. Because here's the thing, you will either lean into what God has for you and God's rhythm for you, even if it's countercultural, or you'll listen to other people, you'll listen to culture, you'll listen to fear. And so I'm going to ask the question one more time. What is the price of your current pace? You should talk to your spouse about it, your roommate about it, your kids about it. What is the price of your current pace? And then I'm just going to end with this. And this is super practical, but for some of you, if you have the courage to do this in light of what we just talked about, it'll be a big deal. What do you need to add? Now, there's some other stuff that's going to have to go, but there are things that you say as a priority to you that you are going to regret in 5 or 10 years if you don't actually make it a priority. Now, some of you where I'm like, what do you need to add? You're like, another vacation. Here's the only thing, real quick. Time off won't fix your problem if your problem is how you spend your time on. That's why many of you take vacation. You can't wait for the vacation, and then you come back from the vacation more tired than when you went on the vacation. Vacations will not fix the rhythms of your life. This is about your rhythms and your priorities. What do you need to add? What do you need to subtract? Can I just be bold real quick, and then I'll be done? I'm just so bold to say. Some of you need to put a name right there. Because there is somebody, and they're loved by God, and they're an image bearer of God, but they are stealing life from you. For some of you, it's a weekend thing, it's a hobby, it's an activity. When I got married, there were certain things I loved to do, and you should have hobbies, and you should enjoy life, but there were certain things that were not they were not the most important thing to me, and I was willing to give them up for the sake of what I wanted for family. So they're not necessarily bad things, but some of you are running all over the world, and you're doing travel ball in 17 different nations, and you're overextended, and everybody's tired, and you're afraid to quit any of it because you're afraid of somebody's going to fall behind. What do you need to let go of? What do you need to increase? What do you need to decrease? Your time is limited, so limit what you do with your time. And I'll maybe give you some examples next week, but I think we need to be way more extreme with this than we currently are. Your time is limited, so limit what you do with your time. It is your most valuable asset, and I'm going to end with this. I was at lunch on Tuesday and with my friend Ken Green, and Ken attends our church every single weekend. He was here at the 9 a.m. and a huge part of our church. Ken is an aviation engineer. He actually right now is a professor at Embry-Riddle, and he gets embarrassed by this, but just a brilliant man, humble man, incredible story. And so we were having lunch this Tuesday and talking about some of that story. A number of years ago, he led the Denver airport, which is one of the 5 largest airports in the world, led the whole thing. Before that, he was one of 3 guys that led the 4 major airports in New York, like LaGuardia, JFK, the whole deal. And so he's been in this for many, many years. And he told the story of, on 9/11, being in his offices in the North Tower of the World Trade Centers. And he was on the 65th floor. He had 100 and some employees on that floor at the time. And he felt the building shake. And, I won't go through all the details, but knew something had happened and went down, ended up on a mezzanine, and could have gotten out of the building and decided not to. And so he ended up getting authorization, and he was leading people in and out. So he let 25 go, and then 25 would go down the stairs, and he just directed traffic on this mezzanine. Eventually, the South Tower was hit, and he could feel that, but they didn't fully know everything that was going on. And again, part of his role is the 4 major airports in New York. And so he stayed in there. Eventually, the South Tower fell first. It was about 150 yards from where he's at. And so it obviously blew debris everywhere, knocked him off his feet in the mezzanine. Floor that was above him fell on top of him. He was trapped for a little bit of time. Thinking, obviously, his life is over. They were able to rescue him off of that mezzanine. He basically cleaned up that night, trying to process what happened, went back to work for the next 17 days because he is one of the major players in trying to make sure that New York functions after that. And he just has an extraordinary story of faith. There was a season of time where he's like, God, why, which you would absolutely imagine, God, why in the world? I mean, even if you weren't there, people felt that. And eventually he got to the other side of that to believe that God had a plan and a purpose for his days. But on that day, there was 84 of his employees that he led that lost their life. And this is hard for me to even process, but 62 were personal, like friends of his, that he had led for years that on that single day lost their lives. And he talked about on the other side of that, when he regained his faith and his confidence in God as a follower of Jesus, he's like, obviously, as you can imagine, it gives you a completely different perspective on life, where I'm wondering, why in the world them? Why not me? Why was I given another day? But this unbelievably real understanding, I'm not promised tomorrow. That every single day I have is an extraordinary gift because I have been face to face with death. And then he just said this, and this is what got me. He said, every day I get up and I go to my den and I have a picture of those 62 people that I led who lost their lives. And every single day, it is a reminder to me, this is why today matters. That my time is valuable. It's not promised. It's a stewardship. And I'm accountable. And Moses said that 3,000 years before when he said, God, teach us how to learn to number our days so that we can gain a heart of wisdom to live this life different under the umbrella of the fact that God is everlasting to everlasting, generation to generation. He is above and over it all. My life is finite, and my days matter. And because you're the God of the universe and you know the rhythm for my life, you have created me within limits, and so I'm going to live within those limits. And where the margin in the space is, it is an opportunity, it is a declaration of God. I'm not God. And so I trust you. I declare my dependence. I surrender my will. Would you pray with me? Jesus, thank you so much. Give us wisdom to know what to do. Give us the courage to do it. I pray for maybe the individuals who look back at certain seasons, and we all have this. So I just pray that nobody would feel alone in this moment online or podcasting somewhere or in the house, that we just feel like maybe we wasted some time, we wasted some seasons. I pray this is the moment where you would just invade with your extraordinary grace and the gospel that says that you're a God because you are everlasting to everlasting, generation to generation. That you have the ability to multiply time from this point forward, to multiply impact, to do more than we could have ever imagined. But the issue at stake is whether we'll surrender right now. And for some of us, this is going to be hard. It's going to be embarrassing. It's going to take extreme decisions. I pray that our willingness to do that, though, would override our willingness to live with unhealth and do what everybody else is doing. So, God, just give us the courage to act based on the wisdom that you give us and help us to surrender all of the outcomes to you because you are a good God and a good Father. And we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.